Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video I'm going to be building and reviewing the Airfix 176 scale Mark 1 male tank. I've built Mark 4 tanks in the past from MH, but I've been after making a Mark 1 to complete my World War 1 collection for a while. I think it'll be interesting to see how the two offerings compare. The main difference between the Mark 1 and Mark 4 tanks is the trailing wheels on the Mark 1. These were supposed to aid in steering but were soon dropped as they weren't very effective. Another nice difference for model makers is that the first Mark 1 tanks were painted in a camo scheme, so it'll be nice to paint an example of one of the first ever camo patterns ever put onto a tank. In the box you get a bag containing the sprues to make the model, 2 rubber band tracks, a black and white instruction sheet, and a single decal to mark the tank up as HMLS Dragonfly. The paint guide for this model is located on the back of the box. A quick look at the sprues shows that this should be a fast model to build, as there aren't many parts in this kit. The detail on the panels looks quite nice, less fine than that of the MH models. Straight off the bat though, I'm noticing that this tank does not have an exhaust running along the top. Though, after looking at reference pictures, it actually looks like not having this exhaust is correct for this mark, but I could be wrong here. Flash wise, the kit doesn't look too bad. There's a few seam lines to sort out, but most of the parts are fairly flat, so yeah, this shouldn't be an issue and the cleanup should be quite minimal. This kit dates back to a tooling first made in 1967, though yeah, I wouldn't have thought that from just looking at the sprues. I'm assuming this box version of the model is from 2014 as it has a logo marking the centenary of World War 1. Anyway, onto the build. First thing on the menu is the side guns. This kit has an interesting way of doing things. It seems the best way to make this part up is to dry drop all the parts into the gun housing and then just add glue to the outsides of the retaining pieces. Now it's time to build the sponsons for the tank. Again, the kit has you go about this in a strange way, using more of the odd drop in and then glue method. Odd as this is though, it works and the gun can move. Adding the side panels and door is nice and easy, but make sure you get the lip on the door the right way around, as I put mine on upside down the first time. The protruding bit of the door is the lower edge. The kit now wants me to repeat this step again for the opposite side, so I'm going to crack on and do that off screen, as it's exactly the same as this step, only mirrored. Now it's on to making the sides of the tank. This is really simple to do, as it's only the 2 parts. The instructions now want me to make the opposite side, but I'm going to add the gun to this bit straight away so I don't mix up the 2 side pieces. With this bit done, I'm going to repeat this step off screen for the opposite side. Next it's on to adding the centre of the tank. When I first looked at this, I thought I was in for a lot of fun and games getting this together. However, starting with the base and back, then working around adding each piece, made this step pretty easy, and the fit seems pretty solid, even with it not fully dried. With the centrepiece in, I'm adding a few of the hatches and details to this part. Now I'm dry fitting the opposite side to the centerpiece while the model dries, just to make sure everything stays in the correct alignment while the glue's going off. Then it's on to constructing all of the springs for the steering aid, before moving on to the main bulk of this thing. This bit's the trickiest stage of the build I've encountered so far. It goes together okay in the end though, but it will benefit from a good bit of drying time, so the wheels don't get knocked out of alignment. Next it's time to add the steering carriage to the tank. Seems this kit saved the worst bit till last. Adding this to the rear of the tank is a right pain. Adding the springs is a bit tricky, but adding the steering carriage to this is an absolute nightmare. The kit also wants me to add the tracks here, but I'm leaving them off to make painting them easier later on. If you're building one of these kits at home and you're stuck on this stage, I found it helpful to remove the little pip from the bottom of the piston, so you have more area to glue to. This step will also be easier if you construct the model on a flat surface so everything stays in alignment. Be prepared to hold a few of the parts together until the glue grips though, but other than that all I can say is persevere and keep a pokey stick on hand for fine adjustments. I left this part to dry overnight so it was safer to handle. But with that on, that completes the build stage of this model kit. Now it's on to the painting. First I'm giving the tank a base coat of Humbrol 237 Desert Tan, as it looks a fair match for the matte linen that the paint guide suggests. As always, you know the score with spray painting, I'm doing this off screen and outside to avoid fumigation. With the base coat on, it's time to start on the camo. For the first colour, I'm using AK World War I khaki base. I'm trying to follow the camo guide for this model as best as I can. It's nice to be painting a different camo pattern. Here, I'm just going to take my time as there's a lot of angles to cover. Browns down, I move on to painting the greens. For this I'm using Tamiya XF26 Deep Green. I'm liking how this camo is coming together. It's odd to think that this was one of the first patterns ever painted onto the side of a tank. Finally for the camo I'm doing the little black accents. For this I'm using Army Painter Matte Black, as it's thicker than Vallejo Matte Black and less likely to run off into the crevices. This camo was a lot of fun to paint, but it really does throw the eye off. After a couple of hours staring at this thing, I'll be glad to give my eyes a rest. Now it's time to start tying it all together. First I'm giving the model a watered down black wash. This model has good panel lines and takes a wash well. This camo was pretty busy when on flat, and yeah, I think it needed this wash to tone it all down a bit. With the wash dry, I'm adding the one and only decal present in this kit to the front of the tank. Next, it's time for the tank's dust coat. For this, I'm using my tried and tested Army Painter Skeleton Bone. This tank really takes a dry brush well. There are so many rivets on this tank, and this dry brush is doing a great job of highlighting them. This tank has a lot of angles to double check though, so that's something to bear in mind when painting this kit. The dry brush has made the model a little lighter than I would like it to be though, but I'll sort that out a little later on. While I got the dry brush out, I'm also giving the tracks a quick dry brush using Army Painter gunmetal. With these done, it's time to add them to the tank. I can't be bothered to weld these tracks together, so I'm just gluing them straight onto the tank. With the tracks on, the tank's really starting to take shape. Next, I'm darkening the tank down with a wash of BS Dark Earth. Normally I use this as a dirt coat, but on this tank I'm using it as more of a tone, darkening down the overall look of the tank. And though this model is not painted in a perfect colour match, this wash will bring it into the correct sort of tonal range for a World War I tank. Now it's time for more shading. As I nuked out all my black panel lines with that BS Dark Earth wash, now I'm adding the panel lines back in, using a fine brush to apply some watered down Vallejo matte black. Lastly, to finish the tank off, I'm giving it a mud coat. For this, I'm mixing up a bit of fine sand with some AK World War I khaki base and generously dabbing this around all of the low areas of the tank and around the tracks. Personally, I don't think a World War I tank looks complete without a healthy layer of mud. With this mud layer on though, I think I'm going to call this model done. This is the finished model. I'm really liking how this model has come out. It's always nice to paint something from World War I, and I had a lot of fun painting the camo pattern on this tank. In conclusion, the Airfix 176 scale Mark I mail tank is a nice model. I was quite surprised when I found out this model was an older tooling, as despite going about the build in some strange ways, I found this kit a very easy and relaxing build overall, with only the last two steps putting up a bit of a fight. If those parts were left off, this kit would be an ideal model for beginners, but with them on, I'm not so sure about that, as I found them a little frustrating to add. I think this model has better details than those seen on the MH kits, as the panel lines are deeper and the rivets are more pronounced. Build wise though, for the most part this kit is easier to build than that of an MH Mark IV, but the fiddly rear carriage makes them comparable in build difficulty, I think. I picked up this model for £5 second hand. It can be bought for around £7 brand new, and for a pleasant few hours of model making, I think that for that price it's a bargain for what you get in the box. Anyway, that's my build and review of the 176 scale Mark I mail tank. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful if you're building or thinking of buying one of these kits at home. Until next time, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.